Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Mr. J. This is W.A.D. MTG, and today I'm going to talk a little bit of standard. Standard? Standard. Yes, standard. I'm going to talk a little bit of standard today. So, my origins in Magic were as a standard competitive player, but I've since retired from standard for quite some time. I hadn't played standard competitively since like 2013. And last weekend, I came out of my standard retirement to go to an RCQ. So right now, currently, the Pro Tour is going on in Chicago with MagicCon. And right now, it's just in the draft. And the draft is almost over. So I'm getting ready to watch the constructed format. There's like 5 rounds of constructed after the rounds of limited get through, and they get kind of like bracketed out based off their wins in limited, and then depending on how they do in constructed, they can make the top 8 and then go for the world championship. So while I'm talking about standard, I did want to mention that because it's going to shake up the meta. But back to my run. So I went to an RCQ last weekend, and I did pretty well. I didn't make the top 8. I actually placed 9th because I had bad tiebreakers. So I'm going to get into that a little bit. The first round, I was playing Golgari mid-range, which is a deck that's kind of fell off. But since my entire Magic career in Standard has been anti-meta, I wanted to continue on with that because I felt like the meta in Standard is currently currently wide open. So there, with like every deck in Standard currently only has it's 8 to 11% of the meta, every meta deck. So I kind of analyzed those decks and did what I always have done in Standard Magic, which was build a budget anti-meta deck and tried to run it out and see how good I could do. With that being said, I was playing Golgari mid-range. Like I said before, it was a deck that kind of fell off a little bit, but I wanted to bring it back. I thought that I was going to run into a lot of red, so I was running Obliterator. And going forward, I'm probably going to switch that up. I'm going to make some tweaks to the deck and try one more time because I didn't make top 8, which means I didn't, have an opportunity to qualify for the regional championship. But like I said, it's basically just off of bad tiebreakers. So if I could improve that just a little bit, improve that so it doesn't go to tiebreakers, I can make it into the top 8 and have a good run at being able to potentially qualify. So I'll get into my rounds. The first round I played, it was some Abzan cycling plot type of list. Well, I don't know if it really was cycling, but it was plotting cards, and he could dig really deep with this green-black card. He was digging and searching his deck and sacrificing to get value to dig even further. And I basically I aggroed out right away, and I won that round 2-0 by just running aggro Dread Knights into a bunch of removal to remove his threats, and slammed the Obliterator to force through damage because he didn't have any good blocks. And if he did try to block, he'd had to sacrifice permanents. At the end of game 2, he did manage to play a very impressive play where he dug 12 cards deep with the plot card and managed to get the card he needed to sacrifice his board to dig even further to play a board wipe. And the board wipe, it was good, but it wasn't good enough because I was sandbagging. So I still had a win in hand. The following turn, what did I play? I played, I believe it was the Bloodletter of Alclazatz and the, what is it called? The Ritual Chamber, or the Unholy Annex, and then just moved to end step and killed him that way. So I 2-0'd the first round and versus that Abzan list, and then go on to round 2. So round 2 was a much tougher matchup for me personally. Going into the tournament, I thought I had a couple bad matchups, but like I said, I kind of built my deck anti-meta to kind of deal with certain decks, right? So round 2, I played Esper Pixie, I really thought that Esper Pixie, being like the best deck in the format currently in Standard, prior to this World Championship, it's going to shake up the meta quite a bit, and I'm excited to get into that here. It's about to start after like one more round of Limited. So, but prior to this particular Pro Tour going on in Chicago right now, Esper Pixie was known as the best deck in the format. So I thought, looking at the lists of Esper Pixie that I seen online, I thought it was my worst matchup, and it turns out it really wasn't my worst matchup. But I did lose to Esper Pixie round 2. So the guy I lost to in round 2, I lost 2-1. He ended up going undefeated in the Swiss. So I don't know how the top 8 actually shook out, or who won the slips that qualified him for the regional championship. But in the Swiss, the guy I lost to in round 2 went undefeated. Here's the problem. When you're playing RCQ or a Swiss style tournament in Standard, the earlier you lose, the worse it is for you. So because I lost round 2 2-1 to an Esper Pixie deck, it really gave it an uphill battle for me for the remainder of the tournament. So, you know, I felt a little defeated after round 2, and I was like, man, I really thought I had the answer for Esper Pixie, and it turns out I kind of did. I just didn't have the cards in hand that I needed that round, sideboarding out to go up against that particular deck. So, you know, I lost 2-1, and then we're on to round 3. Round 3, I ended up, now I'm in the loser's bracket, right? So round 3, I ended up going up against, what is that deck called? It's like it's a Rise from the Past deck, where they play a bunch of low drops, and they surveil a buttload of times, and they drain and gain based off of the creatures that die, and then they surveil based off the creatures that die, and it runs sack outlets so they can respond. Real heavy aggro, real heavy creature count, and they will sack all these creatures to make good blocks, to get all these triggers, to then surveil from their deck to their graveyard, to dig for Rise from the Past, and then play Rise from the Past and bring their whole board back from the graveyard. So that deck was pretty resilient. I did win that round 2-1. So I was feeling pretty good after round 3. So I don't remember exactly how I won the round. I think what I was doing after I lost the first game was I seen that the deck really revolves around the sack outlets. And if I could remove the sack outlets when they hit the board, so they would then have to maybe respond to sack their rest of their board to dig as far as they can, that would have been the key to victory for me. And it turns out that it was. I also sideboarded, I believe, with Phyrexian Fleshgorgers, which are, you know, it's a prototype card. It's got Menace and Lifelink and Ward, where the ward cost is equal to the power of the Fleshgorger. So with that, and it has Menace, so with that I could put a little bit more pressure, and with my Llanowar Elves into Fleshgorger, as opposed to Dread Knights, which I was still playing the Dread Knights, in combination with the Fleshgorger and the Dread Knights, I was really able to aggro and put a lot of pressure on that particular deck that didn't have any good blocks. So because of that, I was gaining life to make up for the drain and gain effects coming out of that deck. I was able to sideboard out really well and to dominate the rest of that matchup. So I won that matchup 2-1, and I go on to round 4. In round 4, I played against it was this blue-white-green deck, and it basically made, it was an aggro deck. Okay, so it basically made a buttload of tokens. It made maps and clues, and off the maps and the clues, it then would play in its biggest threat. The biggest threat of that deck was a fucking Regal Bunnycorn. And I'm kind of ashamed to admit it, but I lost the fucking Regal Bunnycorn. I lost that round 2-1 as well. So I'm positioned really well, because even the 2 losses that I did have going into round 5, I won a round in each one. And then the 2 wins, I was 2-0 and then 2-1. So it had me positioned pretty well going into round 5. I'll talk a little bit about the the matchup against the aggro regal bunnycorn for a second. I had one good play at the end. His regal bunnycorn was like an 11-11 or 12-12. Had a buttload of maps, shitload of fucking clues and stuff on the field, and didn't have a whole lot of lands. So I was able to obliterate her. I removed with a cut down. I removed this little artifact threat that you pay a blue and sack it. It turns into like a mana drain. So I was able to remove that to force the activation. I let it resolve just to get that card out of the field. So then I could tail swipe the obliterator and make it fight the regal bunnycorn. So the problem there was, even after he sacked all the clues and map tokens that he had, he was able to sack those, really lose nothing, and then sack the rest of his lands, and I was still dead on board, just because he created too many permanents, and he was able to swing through for the victory there. So going into round 5, that's what really got me to the tiebreaker scenario, was losing to the regal bunnycorn deck. If I could have beat that deck, I would have been positioned a lot better going into round 5 of Swiss, and that probably would have got me automatically into the top 8, where it didn't have to go to tiebreakers. So to talk a little bit more about that matchup, I kind of think the guy that I went up against cheated a little bit, because my deck ran so smooth all day. It was running great. I had good hands all day, and I go up against this regal bunnycorn matchup, and we're 1-1 going into the final round, and I was going to be on the play. So when it came to shuffling and cutting my deck, I presented my deck to him ready for a cut, and instead of just cutting it and being a competitive situation, he did shuffle cut my deck, right? But instead of jam shuffling, instead of like jam or cram shuffling, he kind of like cycle shuffled, right? Where you take it, put some in the front, put some in the front, put some in the back, put some in the front. And it did look like he was looking at it as he was shuffle cutting. So I could have called the judge over and been like, hey, look, I need a judge's cut. He could have looked at that and made it so where he presented what he could see was a bad hand for me to draw going into the play in round 3. And moving forward, I definitely will call the judge in those scenarios and ask for a judge cut, and actually voice that I do believe he looked at my deck and presented me with a bad hand on purpose, which is cheating. And if you can't really prove it, I think it's like a game warning, and the judge will just cut the deck for you or shuffle it and cut it and then present it to you to grab your opening hand. But he did it. It's really upsetting because it appeared to me as if he did it twice going into that game 3. Where he did it twice, and I ended up having to mulligan down to 5 on the play. So because I had to mulligan down to 5 on the play, that put me at a huge disadvantage into that game. I'm down 3 cards because I'm on the play and he gets to draw. So he's on 8 cards and I'm on 5. So I very quickly got ran over in game 3 and lost that round 2-1. Now, like I said, moving forward, I'm just going to call the judge over if anybody does that, because in a competitive situation, it is okay to shuffle cut your opponent, right? Like, that's something that the higher levels of competitive play does, like every game. They'll do that like every game. Instead of just cutting. Now, I personally have a history of cutting certain types of ways to try to maybe give my opponent a bad hand. It doesn't always work. Sometimes I get a good hand off it, and I cut 3 or 4 different kinds of ways, but I never really pick up the opponent's deck and jam shuffle it, because I feel it's kind of disrespectful, right? You take their deck, they put a lot of time into it, they've got a lot of money in their cards, and you start jam shuffling their deck as if you don't trust them, like they stacked their own deck prior to cutting. And even if that is the case, like they pile shuffle twice, you have to jam shuffle before you present the deck to your opponent, so you're not presenting a stacked deck. And I haven't seen anybody really do that. I usually pile shuffle after every 2 rounds. I'll pile shuffle and then I'll jam shuffle and present a deck, because then I know it's a legal deck to present and my deck isn't stacked, but it is mixed up fairly well after I pile shuffle it twice, remove the lands, pile shuffle it twice, jam shuffle a bunch of times, and then present it to my opponent. But with that being said, I took that L, I didn't say anything about it. Moving forward, I definitely will. And we're on to round 5. So coming into round 5, now I have bad tiebreakers because I lost 2 rounds. At the point where I'm going into round 5, I actually felt pretty good about it because I thought that my tiebreakers were better than they were because the other person that I lost to was undefeated. Was undefeated through 4 rounds. He went undefeated through the entire Swiss. So I'm thinking, okay, well my tiebreakers are actually pretty good because this guy's undefeated. But the dude that I think may have like cheat cut my deck by shuffling it and looking at what he was doing, he actually, I think I was his only win all day. I think I was his only win all day. So there's some feel bads there because I didn't realize that he like lost out the day, and I thought that he was doing a lot better than he was doing because I was doing fairly well. So the first round I 2-0, that's 2 wins. The second round I got beat 2-1, so that's 3-2. In the third round I won 2-1, so that's 5-4. And then that fourth round I lost 2-1, so that's 6-6. So I thought I was doing pretty well going into the final round. Evened out, 50-50 win ratio, and I'm thinking, okay, well, if I can win this one out and like 2-0 this person, then I'll probably be in position to make top 8. And that's exactly what I did. Round 5, I won 2-0, and my matchup was Esper Pixie. So I'm going up against another Esper Pixie deck, and I'm like, damn, like this deck again. And I wanted another crack at it, but I was kind of distracted because the pilot that was playing Esper Pixie round 5 was actually a very, very cute young girl. Like, she was like maybe 25, 26 years old, but she was very, very cute. And that was it kind of threw me off a bit because it's not to be expected, right? Like, you don't expect to go to an LGS for a Magic tournament and expect to see, a very cute girl. Like, there's probably some girls in there, but they're not normally like hot, right? Like, they're normally not hot. So that kind of threw me off a bit. And talking to her, she was a very smart pilot. She played her rounds very well, even though I was able to grind her out with Unholy Annex and my demon plays. I was able to grind her out. I was able to get bloodletters out and play multiple annexes. So I'm hitting her for 8. And then on the final turn, here's what actually happened. In one of the rounds, she hit me with that Endless Nightmare card like 8 fucking times. Like 8 fucking times, and I still managed to win that game. Because what I was doing, I was jamming the Unholy Annexes in both rounds to get card advantage. So even though she was able to play that card, bounce the other card, and play the Endless Nightmare over and over and over and over again, it really didn't tempo me out that bad because she wasn't really top decking into the blue version of the card that bounces my stuff, and she had to bounce her own stuff to then replay her land, float her land, and be able to continue to keep pace with what I was doing because I sideboarded after the first game. Well, I ran her over pretty quick. The first game was super aggro. Like I played 3 Mosswood Dread Knights. It was like turn 1 Llanowar Elf, turn 2 Mosswood Dread Knight, turn 3 2 more Mosswood Dread Knights, and she wasn't really able to answer that into Unholy Annex, into Bloodletter of Alcazats. Now I think I might even played it a little different. I might have played the demon out first in the first round and then opened the Unholy Annex, but because I was so aggro, and then I sideboarded out the same thing I sideboarded before. I sideboarded out the Phyrexian, I sideboarded in the Phyrexian Flesh Gorgers and Duress. Now Duress is a huge card versus like Azorius Oculus, any control deck, Esper Pixie, because you can, like, especially if they have to mulligan, and then you hit them with a Duress, so you have perfect information, and you get rid of the one card that's the biggest threat, which is This Town Ain't Big Enough. This Town Ain't Big Enough is huge in that deck. It's very, very awesome tempo to be able to bounce the thing, replay the thing, get extra value, and bounce something else on your opponent's board for 2 mana. It seems a little overpowered for the format, and that's probably why, like, the recurring Endless Nightmares, the recurring Nowhere to Runs, to be able to play the Storm Chasers talent over and over and over again, and then play This Town Ain't Big Enough, is what really I feel like makes that deck very, very good. But if you're playing a deck that has a ridiculous amount of card advantage, it's something that you can overcome, especially if you're playing aggro, because if they're playing early and you force them to play on the defensive, they don't have very good blocks. If you let them start churning out a little bit better before you can start dropping your threats, then they have a much better scenario for them where they can play that blue flyer that comes out, gets a counter because it's got the Eerie card out that gives it a counter, bounce something on my field for a tempo play, and then have the 3/4 flyers a threat, which is hard to block and a little harder to remove. So going into the last round of the Swiss, I 2-0'd that, so I think that would make my I think 8-6. Let's see, 2-0'd the first one, 1-2 the second one. That's 3-2. The third one, a 2-1, so that's 5-3, and then the fourth one I got 2-1, so that's 6. It was 6-5. It was 6-5, not 6-6. So it was 6-5, and then the fifth round I won 2-0. So it was actually 8-5 was my final record, which is a pretty good win ratio. I think it's like 61.58% or something is what I finished with. So looking at the board afterwards, they had to do some recalculating. But what it ended up being was I needed the guy that played the stupid Regal Bunnycorn deck, I needed him to win so that my opponent's win percentage was higher, because first tiebreakers go off of strength of schedule. So even though the second deck I played that was Esper Pixie did well, and I beat her, which evened her kind of out, that made her win percentage lower. And then the guy that played Regal Bunnycorn got his ass whooped through the whole tournament, so that made his win percentage lower. And the first guy I played that had that plot self-sacrifice Abzan deck, he also had a bad record. So my opponent's strength of schedule wasn't that great, even though I thought it was better than it was, because I got beat by the guy who was undefeated, who ended up going undefeated. So when it came down to the tiebreakers, even though I had a really good win percentage at like 61.58 or whatever, or 53 or something like that, my opponent's win percentage was actually not as good. So when the tiebreakers came down, there's two people that got into top 8, 7th place and 8th place, that had a worse win percentage rating than I did, because they must have got 2-0'd or whatever. They had a worse win percentage rating than I did, but their opponent's win percentage was better than mine. So when our overall record through the Swiss being 3-2 in the 5 rounds of Swiss, were tied, their win percentage was lower, but their opponent's win percentage was higher. And that's where the tiebreakers come in, as the opponent's win percentage. So moving forward, I do want one more crack at it, because I placed in 9th. And I had a good day coming out of a standard retirement and coming back into a format that it really is wide open. Standard's wide open. It's a good format to play right now. The changes that Wizards has done to the format really has made it a much better environment to play in Standard. It's not really ruled over by 1 or 2 decks. You don't see a particular card in 40-50% of the decks, like you probably do in Modern right now, with the Underworld Breach Grinding Station combo and the Mox Opal being the most consistent deck in Modern right now. So it's not like that. It really is wide open. Every deck that's part of the meta, that's like you'll see on like Arena, or you'll see when you look up like the top Standard decks, they really have 8 to 11% of the meta share. So if you can go into Standard right now and be comfortable and confident playing Standard with whatever deck you want. With whatever deck you want. If you're a player that's like me, that likes to build anti-meta instead of net decking internet decks, like you just looked up Esper Pixie and went and ordered all the singles for whatever you were missing, sleeved up the deck, you got a decent sideboard, and you say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go pilot Esper Pixie because it's the best deck in the format. I don't think that's really the case. there's ways to deal with that deck. There's ways to tempo out that deck, and I'm going to make some changes to my deck moving forward. So before I was running the Obliterators, right? But I started to notice, okay, well, I've got the Unstoppable Slasher has Death Touch. And then I have these tail swipes in there for the Obliterators, right? But if I tail swipe an Unstoppable Slasher, even after he's been removed and has stun counters on him, he is still a perfect target for that to be able, because he has Death Touch. So even though he can't attack and he's tapped, he can survive a lot of different single target removal, have the counters on him, and I can still jam out the tail swipe fight spells because he has Death Touch and force that removal for 1 mana. And if he dies again, he dies again. I run on another one. If he doesn't, then he's going to come back in a turn or two because he's got stun counters on him. And then I also was playing Glissa, who also has Death Touch, right? First strike Death Touch, and has some card advantage and some enchant removal built in if she deals combat damage and gets through. But otherwise, she's a fantastic blocker. So Glissa has Death Touch. And then if I tweak the deck a bit and run 4... Run 4 Bloodletter Valklazats, and to run off my, because that really won me a buttload of games. That did great all day, running the Unholy Annex and then being able to play the Bloodletter, so you get hit with 4, and then I don't take 2, I gain 2, and I draw. And then I can do that multiple times with multiple Bloodletters and multiple Annexes. And then if I need to, I can run out the Demon and then play the Annex. With the Ritual Chamber, then it just seems like a really, really good play pattern. And so the way I had it before was 3 Slashers and 3 Bloodletters and 4 Llanowar Elves and 4 Dread Knights, right? And then a couple of Obliterators. So if I Elf turn 1 into turn 2 Slasher and to turn 3 Bloodletter, it can give me that turn 3 win, rather than in the other shells that you see demons in is mostly Dimir or Mono Black. They can't do that until turn 4. So I do want to still keep it Golgari. I really like the ability to turn 2 Slasher or to turn 2 Flesh Gorger if I need to sideboard for some life gain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the Obliterators right out, and I'm going to leave the tail swipes in. Because for 1 mana to force him to fight a Death Touch creature or even a Dread Knight at a 3/2, if I play it out on my main phase and proactively play the tail swipe instead of using it as an instant spell on their turn, waiting to see what they do, not only are they usually tapped out and can't respond, but it's proactive and I can get my damage through. And it gives a +1 counter. So even on a Dread Knight, that makes the Dread Knight a 4/3. And so it is a very big target. For the Dread Knight's a very big target for it, even though he doesn't have Death Touch. And then if I swipe out the Obliterators for 1 more Bloodletter, and then I can jam in, I forget exactly how the math went, I can jam in the other Slasher or just keep it at 3 Slashers and jam in 2 Shellies, the Shieldred, the Apocalypse. That's going to give me a little more control since I am drawing a bunch of cards. I'm going to gain more life. I'm going to drain more, and the main threat for that particular deck is having the Bloodletters out with the Unholy Annex. It's just so strong. And then the other card that was an MVP for that particular deck, which is staying in, is Tyvar Stand. I think that's a very underrated card in green right now, or in Golgari, because for 1 mana, your creature gets indestructible and hexproof. Now I know you can Snakeskin Veil and get a +1/+1 counter and give your creature hexproof, but giving it hexproof and indestructible seems really good to me, because not only can you survive single target removal or single target bounce for 1 mana, you can also survive a board wipe of some kind. And the way I was seeing in the meta is there's more white than red, which I thought there would be red, and I only seen, what was it, like two red deck wins that are playing the Mice and the Monstrous Rage and coming in. I think one of them was actually Boros, so they could put Sheltered by Ghosts in, and that other card that gives them double strike. And then there was another deck that was a Gruul version of that particular deck. So seeing 2 or 3 kind of versions of that red deck in the meta where I played, and I didn't actually play against them, and they didn't do well, that means I kind of feel safer taking the obliterators out, because I thought I would see a lot more red, and there wasn't as much red representation as I expected. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna give it 1 or 2 more shots. There are a couple more RCQs coming up. One of them, I believe, from one shop is trying to qualify people for Charlotte, and the other shops are qualifying for the next RC, which is in Atlanta. So if I can get an envelope, I have the money and the time off, vacation time. If I can qualify, I'll go. So what I think I need to do to get to the position so where I can top 8 and have a chance at qualifying is by making the deck a little more meta. So we'll take out the obliterators, we'll put in a bloodletter, we'll put a couple Shellys in there, maybe the slasher. We'll keep the Tyvar stand, because Tyvar stand, even off the demon, like, so let's say I ritual chamber into a 5/5 flying demon. The Tyvar stand allows me to continue to be aggressive. So I can activate that either in my main phase or my combat phase, go into combat, wait for them to try and remove it, respond with Tyvar stand, and this is why this is like an MVP. I can spend the rest of my mana that I'm not going to spend on anything else. Unless I got like a Dread Knight or something I run out for 2, or another elf I run out for 1. Spend the rest of that mana to pump up that demon to get an alpha strike in. And that did win me a game, and another game or 2. One of the reasons why I was able to hit with the Bloodletter, Unholy Annex kind of combo, and then play another Annex, was because they went to remove the Bloodletter, and I played Tyvar stand in response. So I'm going to keep that deck basically the same, but I'm going to make it a little more meta by taking out the obliterators, putting in the Shellys, putting in another Bloodletter. And I don't know exactly how the rest of the math works out, but that's kind of in my head how I see it going. And like I said, Standard is a healthy format right now. It's healthy, it's wide open, and let's see moving forward. Today, I'm going to get off of here, and I'm going to go watch the rest of the Pro Tour and see how the Standard constructed Pro Tour goes, and what these guys are playing, the best players in the world are playing to shake up the current Standard meta, and how much I'm going to see, as per Pixie. That's going to be really interesting to see, because it's a deck that a pro would want to play. It has a lot of tools, it can do a lot of things, it can recur over and over and over and over again, and get this endless nightmare loop, or this nowhere to run loop, or something like that churning. That seems really attractive if you're a pro player to try and run that deck. But I don't do that. I don't do what other people are doing. I do kind of the unpopular thing, the anti-meta thing, and I try and run that out. That's my entire Magic career. So I'm going to continue to do that. I will make the deck a little bit more meta by taking out the obliterators, because I don't expect to see a lot of red. And we'll see what the Pro Tour does and these professional Magic players do to shake up the meta. And that's about all I got for today. Play Standard, guys. I'm Mr. J. This is W.A.D. MTG. I'm out. Peace.